Now we look at number 2 in our series on themes in the Gospel of John, and this one is looking at signs of Jesus' divinity. I don't believe you can read John's Gospel and not be convinced that Jesus is the divine Son of God. There is so much there that leads in that direction. We're given a few examples in the biblical material for this time. We're given John 6, John 9, and John 11. But of course, there's so much more. I like to think of that experience of Jesus when he talks with those leaders of the Jewish faith who are saying, well, you're talking about as if you knew Abraham. And he says, before Abraham was, I am. He uses the word that God gave Moses right back there in the beginning to describe who he was. Say, I am is the one who sent you. But let's go to these biblical texts for this time. They're in John chapter 6, feeding of the 5,000. An amazing miracle, quite remarkable. In the latter part of John 6, Jesus talks about being the bread of life. He is the source of all things living. He's the source of all that we see. He is the creator. John chapter 1. Why don't we mention that? Without him was not anything made that was made. He is the creator. That is certainly a sign of divinity, I would say. John 9 is the story of the healing of the blind man and then the arguments that followed, because the Pharisees don't really want to accept that this man has been healed, because it would indicate that Jesus did have those supernatural powers. But it's still, of course, these open the question, was he then divine? I think John 11, the resurrection of Lazarus, is the primary example of what Jesus was and is in terms of what he tried to do. There are 2 other resurrections, of course, Jairus' daughter and the widow of Nain's son. But here in the story of the raising of Lazarus, we even have it recorded that because of that resurrection miracle, many people believed in Jesus. In fact, those, I would say, reprobate religious leaders of Jesus' time wanted to dispose of Lazarus as well as Jesus, because Lazarus was a living testimony to all that Jesus could do as the Son of God, as a divine being. So as we look at these various signs, we have to ask ourselves, okay, like we saw last week, are we dependent on the miracles? He was asked by other people. Herod said, give us a sign, give us a miracle. The Jewish leaders came and said, we want you to show us a miracle in heaven, some kind of sign writing in the sky or something, I don't know. Is that what convinces us? Or is it what Jesus said, what he did, and primarily his gift of himself for us in the cross and the resurrection? That, to me, is what is really significant about his divinity. Jesus says, I can lay down my life and I can take it up again. Who could ever say that unless they truly were divine? This is not a human being speaking. As C.S. Lewis said very eloquently, he was either a lunatic in the same way that a man says, I'm a poached egg or something, or he was what he said he was. You can't simply say, well, he was a good teacher, he had a very interesting philosophy, he was a very important historical figure, or anything like that. If he really was who he said he was, you have to look at that and say, either he's nuts or he truly is what he said he was. When he's challenged by the high priest there during his trial, he is commanded, adjured, I think the old translation said, are you the Messiah? You have to tell us. And at that point, Jesus says, yes, I am. And you will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven, and so on. That is what convinced them of his, quotes, blasphemy, but he was only telling the truth. In fact, he really was going to be doing that, and that is what our hope is, looking forward to Jesus coming again. Well, there's a lot for us to think about this week. Think of what convinces you, especially in the Gospel of John, that Jesus is truly divine, and let's share that with those around us.